Alright, so Yugi-Kaiba format is basically the first Yu-Gi-Oh format. It only uses Legend of Blue Eyes and the Yugi and Kaiba starter decks, and goes by the May 2002 ban list. There are no forbidden cards, but there are limited and semi-limited. In the limited list, we have the Power 5, consisting of Pot of Greed, Change of Heart, Monster Reborn, Dark Hole, and Raigeki. Semi-limited is just Swords of Revealing Light and Card Destruction. So, currently, in the year of our Lord, 2022, there are basically three main builds that people use. Historically, the standard deck would often be referred to as Fiend Spellcaster or FS, and variations of this standard FS deck make up most of the builds that people play today. The basis of these decks are high attack normal summons like Lijin, Neo the Magical Swordsman, and Battle Locks, often with one high defense monster like Giant Soldier of Stone. Maneater Bug is a staple of 3 in every deck as its targeted removal, which is really valuable here, and you usually see at least one Summon Skull. Spells consist of the Power 5 that I previously mentioned, Fissures, and often Swords of Revealing Light and Dispel, although lately we've seen builds that are experimenting with removing one or both of these. For traps, you're going to run all trap holes, reinforcements, and most likely all of Obokus. There are basically two variations of this build that are like high tier. Frankly, there's more wiggle room than people give this credit for when it comes to like deck building and options and siding, but I'm only going to cover the two main variations of standard for now. I might do a future video covering other decks, but so the first is usually called Soul Control. People call it Soul Beat, but they're wrong. This deck uses 3 skulls and at least 2 soul exchanges. Sometimes you see the Judge Man, like 1 Judge Man and a 3rd soul. Even sometimes, frankly, people even try to do like 2 Judge Man, but usually it's either 3 skulls and 2 souls, or 3 skulls, 1 Judge, and 3 souls. So this deck plays safer than other standard builds, and it likes long games, engaging in battles for board control and card advantage in the early and mid game to overpower the opponent in the end. Of course, because the standard decks are still so similar, you can end up in positions with this deck where you need to play more beat and aggro-oriented, but all things considered, it's generally the controllier variant of the standard builds. Secondly, we have the UO build that uses Ultimate Offering and 1600 monsters, usually just 1 Summon Skull, if any, and this deck wants to simplify the board state and draw more monsters than the opponent while having less bricks. You can use UO on Chain Link 2 to miss the activation window of the opponent's trap hole, and or go for big damage pushes to force Waboku's removal, or just take a bunch of damage from the opponent and build a threatening board for your continued attacks on the following turns. I consider this deck the more beatdown and aggro-oriented list of the standard decks. When 2 standard decks fight each other, to put it simply, basically every card is going to 1-for-1 by default. This isn't always true, but it's a general rule of thumb. You want to time the use of the cards in a way that gives you a particular advantage depending on the board state and reads of what the opponent has. Or just draw Lijin while your opponent has a handful of 1700s. So the other main deck type is Stall. There are a few versions, but Stall Mill is by far the most usable one. It usually is going to run more than 40 cards and max out on 2k defense monsters, Wall of Illusion, and of course Maneater Bug. There's no need for any beaters because they're easier to remove and allow the opponent's trap holes to be used, when usually you're going to be wanting to only set so that you completely blank the opponent's trap holes. Likewise, you aren't going to need reinforcements. Trap Hole and Waboku are still really useful traps, and also Ultimate Offering to safely set monsters in the opponent's battle phase without risking damage, removal, or a skull to drop and remove any more of your monsters than it needs to. The Power 5 are still fantastic spells, as well as Swords of Revealing Light. Fissure is less useful here than ever, but is still often incorporated at 3. 2 soul exchanges are often used as both targeted removal and so that you can set more defense monsters. The 2 sort of options for soul are Gyakutino Megami, because of the 1800 attack if it gets reborn or is somehow ran into and left alive. Or Reaper of the Cards for its effect that could potentially hit an opponent's reinforcements, as hitting Trap Hole or Roboku isn't really going to do you any good, but it is not a fairy, and Yami, the field spell, both increases Fiend and Spellcaster attack while decreasing the fairy's defense, so it's going to let Lejin and Neo beat over Megami and your Spirit of the Harp. So Reaper could potentially keep that from happening. Of course, it's worth mentioning that almost no standard deck is going to run Yami in its main, so You're going to use at least 1 card destruction as a finisher to mill the opponent, ideally in the end game, but optionally in an earlier mid game if it's like a really sticky situation and it's better for you to use it then. But you want to be careful if you're not using it as a finisher. So Stall is like obviously weaker to the soul build of standard than the 1600 build, but it can still see success against it. Sighting is kind of tricky. You often see like full conversion sides from Stall, hoping that the opponent oversides and you get your good draws. But considering that you're probably going to run over 40 cards, you're going to be playing a worse version of Standard than the opponent is, and will definitely be disadvantaged if they don't overside. On the flip side though, if you are the person battling Stall, you can easily side into a deck that completely destroys Stall. But if you do this and the Stall player goes with a full conversion, you're likely going to be at a great disadvantage. So it's going to be best probably just to side a few cards. In general, it's a tricky deck when it comes to siding for both players, trickier than a standard build. If 2 Stall mill decks fight each other, may God help your soul. Alright, so now I'm going to address some common misconceptions about this format. First of all, Lord of These legal text is the unlimited version. We pretty much have proof that this is the case before the ban list was even put into effect. So it only protects dragons from being targeted, not from spells on a whole. Waboku and Uo work as they always have, don't overthink it. Trap Hole is a little wonky and debatable, but we generally rule it within the community as of the date of this video being uploaded. If Uo is chained to Trap Hole, the old monster is destroyed and not the newly summoned one. Last Will can be used either before or after the monster is sent to your graveyard. Promo cards are not legal as they were not distributed by Upper Deck, they were distributed by Konami. Those promos were not legal in any format until February 2003. Replay at this time was different from the way it is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, so if a replay occurs, you can then go on to declare an attack with a different monster, then redeclare with the one that you had declared with before. In Ancient Yu-Gi-Oh! There's also only 1 chain per battle and damage step, but this doesn't really come up in any reasonable way this format. Okay, so now I'm going to explain something that could be common knowledge, but due to Waboku's text being written a little weird and misconceptions surrounding how it used to work, I'm just going to clarify that Waboku cannot be used in the damage step, while reinforcements can. So you need to use Waboku in the battle step if you plan on using it. As a side note, if you're attacking and plan to use Waboku, it's a commonly accepted shortcut to use it immediately upon attack. Because if you choose to wait and see what the opponent does and the opponent doesn't respond, you would lose the ability to activate it and the game would proceed. This keeps us from having to ask for damage step on every attack to avoid giving away information, and saves time. Another thing that I often get asked to explain to new players is why Wall of Illusion isn't a common choice, and Giant Soldier is now often used in its place. This is because flip effect monsters can be abused by running into Wall and then being reset. In addition, Soldier with reinforcements becomes 18,000, while Wall can't really use this card meaningfully. Though it's worth mentioning with all the tribute monsters going around now, Wall is worth considering, and Waboku can be used as a defensive option to attack somewhat safely and get a lot of damage, but this is still a neg 1 and must be used very carefully. All things considered, Giant Soldier of Stone is still the safer and often more valuable option for a high defense monster in a standard build. If you're interested in the format, I definitely recommend checking out Format Library in my Discord server, Yugi-Kaibaland. Format Library offers ranked games and tournaments of many retro formats, including, of course, our beloved Yugi-Kaiba, while Yugi-Kaibaland offers consistent free entry tournaments with prize support, as well as being a general resource hub and a place to archive deck lists and information about Yugi-Kaiba. I hope you got something out of this video, and I hope to see you in the servers. If you liked the video, please consider giving a like, subscribing, and commenting any questions, criticism, or what you might want to see in future videos of this type. Peace out.